I don't live in a neighborhood. I am serving a sentence in a triangular prison, a sick chessboard where my mother-in-law, Bernice, is the only one allowed to move the pieces. Her house sits in the middle, a perfect watchtower. On the left is the house of my husband and me, Arthur and Eleanor. On the right is the house of my brother-in-law, Julian, and his diamond wife, Sophia. The windows of her house are not meant for sightseeing, they are a permanent surveillance lens, and every breath, every action of mine is recorded, analyzed, and judged. There was a time so far away it feels like a previous life, when I truly considered Bernice my second mother. With the nature of someone who was not born to flatter, I naively believed that sincerity and silent care would speak for themselves. I stayed by her side when she was sick, cooked the porridge she liked with my own hands, patiently listened to her old stories with all the respect a daughter-in-law could have. But my sincerity, over 5 long years, was not answered with affection, but with suspicion and bitter comparisons that tore my heart apart. The love I once had died slowly, rotted away, leaving only one thing: endurance. This morning started like every other morning in my sentence. At 8 o'clock, I was sitting at my computer, trying to focus on an unfinished design when the door burst open without a knock. Bernice drifted in like a ghost, carrying the harsh sting of strong perfume and a smile I knew was the shell of a daily dose of poison. "Eleanor," she said sweetly, her eyes sweeping over my loungewear. "You're still in your pajamas at this hour? Sophia just called me at 7 this morning. The girl is already on her way to the office. She has a board meeting today. She really is so talented and hardworking." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice calm. "Good morning, Mom. You're here early?" "I brought Arthur some pastries," she said, placing the pastry box on the table, but her eyes were already scanning my workspace. "Sophia just closed a big deal. Seeing her in those suits, busy with work, I'm just so proud. Arthur is really lucky that his brother married such a capable woman. Julian's life is secured now." She paused and stared at my computer screen. "This work-from-home job of yours, does it make money, dear?" "I just worry about my Arthur, having to shoulder all the financial burden for the family. Poor boy." Every word she spoke was a poison-tipped needle, slowly piercing my dignity. "We're doing fine, Mom," I answered, my fingers stiff on the keyboard. "Sure," she smiled, a smile that never reached her cold eyes. "I just think beauty and degrees are a woman's biggest assets. Sophia has both. And you are very devoted to the family. I suppose that is another kind of asset." She finished, gliding out as quickly as she came, leaving me frozen in my own home with the lingering smell of perfume and the aftertaste of humiliation. I wondered how many people out there were also trapped in their own invisible prisons built from words, comparisons, and toxic expectations. Every day, Bernice's words were an eraser, wiping away a bit of me, a bit of confidence, a bit of sincerity. I was only the shadow of Sophia, a faint existence defined by contrast, not as beautiful, not as talented, not as skillful. I was a faint pencil mark next to a brilliant portrait, and the tragedy was, that portrait was hanging right inside my own home. That evening, when Arthur came home, he found me sitting blankly in the kitchen. He walked over and wrapped his arms around me from behind. Something happened again. I leaned my head on his chest, feeling the familiar warmth. Just the usual. Arthur is really lucky that his brother married such a capable woman. Julian's life is secured now. I repeated her exact words, and hearing them come from my own mouth tasted bitter. Arthur sighed, a sigh I had heard 1,000 times. He turned me around and looked straight into my eyes. "Honey, you know how Mom is. Just, don't listen to her. Don't let her get to you." The same comforting words, painfully familiar. "How can I not care, Arthur?" My voice cracked. "She walks into our home and tells me I'm not good enough, every day. What am I supposed to do?" "Mom doesn't mean it like that," That's just the way she talks. He brushed my hair, his face filled with exhaustion. Her way of talking is killing me, I whispered. Please, Eleanor, he pleaded. For me. For our son, Leo. Try to ignore it, okay? We're a family. The word family sounded so fake. Arthur's love was real, I knew that. It was like a warm blanket on a freezing night. But the problem was, I wasn't standing in the cold. I was standing in a storm. And a blanket, no matter how warm, could not shield me from the gale. He wanted me to ignore the storm. But how can one ignore it when the wind is howling in your ears and the rain is slapping your face? I realized a horrifying truth. In this so-called family, in this fight for my own survival, I was utterly alone. The warm blanket I called Arthur's love could not shield me from the storm, and that storm was about to grow into a Category 5 hurricane. 2 weeks before Christmas, while I was at the market, my phone rang. Seeing the name Mom Bernice pop up, my stomach tightened as if I had swallowed a block of ice. I answered, and her honey-coated venomous voice filled my ear. Eleanor, she said, her tone cheerfully alarming. I'm calling to let you know that our family will be hosting a big Christmas party at my house this year. I want you to invite your folks over so we can all celebrate together. It's been so long since I last saw them, hasn't it? A cold wave of panic rushed down my spine. This wasn't an invitation. This was a summons. This wasn't a party. This was a trap, a carefully constructed stage, and I knew my role wasn't daughter-in-law but doormat. Worse, this time, she wanted to drag my parents into her show of humiliation. Yes, I murmured, my throat dry. But my parents back home might feel awkward. Awkward about what? She cut in, the sweetness gone, replaced by unmistakable authoritarianism. You're the daughter-in-law of this family, your parents are in-laws. They have to come. Just tell them that. I'm hanging up now, I still have to call Sophia's parents. The call ended, leaving me in dead silence. That night, I talked to Arthur, trying to convey the fear choking my heart. Arthur, I don't think this is a good idea. Mom. You know how she is. Arthur, as always, was lost in the blind optimism of a son who loves his mother. Come on, honey, don't be so negative. She just wants everyone together. Your parents will be happy to see that we're living a good life. A good life? I almost screamed. Do you see me happy? He sighed, the same helpless sigh again. Eleanor, it's just one evening. Please try, for me? And so, I surrendered. I called my parents, lying that it would be a warm evening, that my mother-in-law was very eager to see them. I personally pushed the people I loved most into an arena I knew they couldn't win. The day of the party, the cruel difference was obvious from the very first moment. Sophia's parents arrived first. They stepped out of a luxury car, carrying a bottle of expensive imported wine. Mrs. Bernice rushed to the door as if welcoming royalty. Oh, you're here, she exclaimed, her voice full of excitement. My goodness, you look so elegant today. This bottle must be top-notch. Please come in, make yourselves at home. 15 minutes later, my parents arrived. My father's old pickup truck parked a bit farther away. My parents walked in, carrying a large basket of fresh fruit just picked from our garden, oranges and grapefruits still freshly ripe. It was the most precious thing they had. Mrs. Bernice glanced at the fruit basket, the smile on her lips stiffening a little. Ah, have your folks come over are here, she said, her voice indifferent, without any hug, without a hint of warmth. Come in. Just leave the fruit basket in the corner of the kitchen for me. My parents, simple farmers all their lives, were slightly embarrassed by that coldness, but they still smiled and greeted everyone. I felt my heart ache. The torture performance had only just begun. Throughout the entire meal, I didn't get to sit still for a second. Right in front of my parents, the ones who raised me, the ones who taught me about dignity, I was treated no differently than a maid. "Eleanor, go get a bigger plate," Mrs. Bernice ordered just as I had sat down. I stood up and went to the kitchen. As soon as I set the plate down, she spoke again. "Eleanor, Sophia's father's tea is almost gone. Go brew a new pot." Julian, my brother-in-law, chimed in. "Let Sophia do it, Mom." "No," she dismissed. "Sophia is a director. Her hands are for signing million-dollar contracts, not for brewing tea. This kind of work should be left to Eleanor." Every word, every command from her was an invisible slap across my face and my family's face. I bit my lip hard, holding back tears as I went into the kitchen. From the living room, I faintly heard Mrs. Bernice chatting with Sophia's mother, loud enough for me and my parents to hear. "You see, you must agree with me. Marrying a wife who's bad at finances is miserable. The man has to shoulder everything alone." My Julian was wise. With Sophia being talented and supportive, the two of them rose up very quickly. I stood in the kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the counter. I wasn't just being insulted. She was trampling on my parents' sacrifices, the ones who had worked so hard to raise me, to give me the education I have today. But the peak of cruelty hadn't arrived yet. After the meal, Mrs. Bernice stood up, lifted her wine glass, and tapped it lightly to draw attention. "Today, I am truly very happy," she began her speech, her voice full of fake emotion. "I'm happy because of the presence of our in-laws here," she said, turning toward Sophia's parents, who gave birth to a diamond daughter, a wonderful wife, a brilliant director for our family. "Thanks to Sophia, this family is becoming more and more prestigious. Thanks to your family's support, my children have what they have today." She continued praising Sophia and her family to the skies, talking about their accomplishments, their overseas trips, their expensive designer items. She spoke as if only they existed in the room. My parents and I, we became invisible ghosts, useless extras in her perfect family picture. I no longer heard what she was saying. The fury and pain made my ears ring. But then I glanced toward my parents. And that was the moment that changed everything. My mother, a woman who had toiled her whole life, was bowing her head, looking at her shirt, an image of silent sadness. But what broke me, what became the final blade stabbing through the shell of endurance inside me, was my father's eyes. My father, the strong man who had spent his whole life protecting me, who had never let me suffer even a little injustice, was now sitting there, motionless. His eyes didn't look at Mrs. Bernice, didn't look at anyone. They were looking at me. Eyes full of pain, sorrow, and a helplessness I had never seen in him before. It was the look of a father being forced to watch his daughter being trampled right in front of him without being able to do anything. Those eyes told me that my silence wasn't just hurting myself, it was killing the two people who loved me most in this life. In that moment, something inside me shattered, and then solidified. The suffering of the past 5 years evaporated in an instant, replaced by a cold fury, clear and sharp like an ice blade. I realized that my silence wasn't a virtue. It was a crime. A crime against myself, and a crime against my parents' love. That night I didn't sleep. I lay next to Arthur, listening to his even breathing, but my mind was a quiet battlefield. The cold fury after seeing my father's eyes had frozen into a block of ice inside my chest. I no longer felt pain. I no longer felt sadness. I only felt a frightening clarity. The fog of endurance and false hope had vanished. Leaving behind a bare truth, I was in a war I hadn't even acknowledged the existence of. The next morning, as I was sitting in the kitchen, staring at my cup of coffee that had already gone cold, the doorbell rang. I knew who it was. Only one person in this family had the kind of confidence to come to someone's house right after participating in a public execution. I opened the door. Sophia stood there, holding a box of pastries from the most expensive bakery in town, smiling a smile she had probably practiced in front of a mirror. "Hello, Eleanor," she said, her voice sweet like sugar laced with poison. I brought you some almond croissants. I know you like them. You must have been tired last night. I stepped aside for her to come in, not saying a word. My silence seemed to throw her off a bit, but she quickly returned to her role as the kind, thoughtful sister-in-law. Don't take last night to heart, she said, placing the box on the table. Mom only said those things, but she didn't mean anything by it. Older people sometimes speak bluntly, you know. Is that so? I finally spoke, my voice sounding strange even to myself. It had no emotion. Of course, Sophia replied quickly, happy I was willing to talk. Mom is just worried about Arthur, wants him to have less hardship. Oh, by the way, she smirked. I know your design job doesn't really make money, right? If you need any financial support, don't hesitate to tell me. After all, we're family. Don't live too frugally and suffer. It was a perfect attack. Not a direct insult, but an offer of help, full of condescension, designed to emphasize her superior position and my inadequacy. She didn't just look down on me, she wanted me to be grateful for that contempt. Thank you, I replied briefly. I don't need it. Sophia shrugged, acting sympathetic. All right then, it's up to you. I just want you to know I'm always here to help. She finished, then left, leaving the box of pastries like a trophy, a reminder of her fake kindness. I stared at the pastry box, having no intention of touching it. In the afternoon, that same day, my phone vibrated. It was Emma, my cousin, calling. She had also been at the party last night. Eleanor, are you okay? My sister's voice was full of worry. I'm calling to see how you're doing. Last night was really outrageous. I'm fine, sis, I answered, and I was surprised to realize I wasn't lying. I truly was fine, in a frightening sort of way. I have to tell you this. She hesitated. When the party ended, at the gate, I happened to overhear Sophia talking to some of her friends. I didn't want to make you even sadder, but I think you need to know the truth. Please go ahead. She took a deep breath. She said, exactly this, look at my sister-in-law. No looks, low education. And her parents from the countryside too, they smell like soil, going to a fancy place and shrinking like that. No wonder my mother-in-law looks down on her, you really can't blame her. Then they all burst out laughing. Every word, every syllable from Emma hit my ears like shards of broken glass. The shock was so strong that I let the phone drop onto the table. My ears rang. Everything around me blurred. My eyes instinctively stared at the back of my right hand, where a raised scar stretched from my elbow to my index finger. And then, the memory from 2 years ago rushed back like a flood, washing away the present. It was a winter afternoon. I was helping Bernice cook stew for dinner. She was carrying a big pot of soup, boiling furiously, down from the stove. Unfortunately, there was a streak of water on the kitchen floor that no one noticed. She slipped, her whole body falling backward, and the pot tilted with her, the stream of red-brown boiling liquid about to pour onto her chest and face. I didn't think for a second. I had no time to be afraid. I reacted purely on instinct. I lunged forward and used all my strength to shove her out of the pot's path. She fell safely to the side, but I did not. The entire pot of scalding liquid spilled across my right arm and hand. A burning pain, violent and sharp as if thousands of red-hot needles were stabbing into my flesh. I screamed, a scream I couldn't hold back, but even in that agony, the first words I uttered through clenched teeth were, "Mom. Are you okay?" Bernice had already bolted upright then, her face pale with terror. When she saw my arm red and blistering, she burst into tears. She crawled toward me, grabbed my uninjured hand, tears streaming down her face. "Eleanor, oh my God. You saved me. Oh God, you saved me. I owe you my life, Eleanor. I owe you my life." The memory faded, leaving me frozen in my present kitchen. The scar on my arm, the proof of my sacrifice, now felt like it was heating up, mocking my stupidity. The life she claimed she owed me. That life had been paid back with years of psychological torment. That life had been repaid with a public humiliation in front of my parents. My kindness, my sacrifice, wasn't just dismissed. It had been cruelly and deliberately erased. And then, another horrifying truth emerged, sharp like a razor blade. Sophia. She wasn't an accidental competitor in my mother-in-law's comparison game. She wasn't a passive bystander who benefited unintentionally. No. The venom Emma had just repeated proved everything. She was an active ally. She was Bernice's accomplice in the campaign to crush and destroy me. Bernice was the executioner, swinging the axe. And Sophia, with her sweet smile and flattering words, was the one sharpening the blade, making sure every strike cut as deep as possible. I didn't have one enemy. I had two. The feeling of utter loneliness and betrayal didn't break me. Instead, it forged my anger into a weapon. It wasn't ice anymore. It was steel, tempered in the fire of truth, cold, solid, and sharp. I stood up, picked up Sophia's box of croissants, walked to the trash bin, and dropped it in without a second of hesitation. And that fury didn't explode into yelling or tears. It sank, becoming a deadly silence, a cold and focused energy. After throwing Sophia's pastries in the trash, I didn't sit there stewing in the cruelty. I acted. I walked into my small workspace, filled with unfinished designs and suffocated dreams. I didn't turn on the computer. Instead, I pulled open the bottom drawer and took out an old dusty box. Inside was everything I had unconsciously collected over the years, old expense notebooks, crumpled receipts, papers I had saved for some reason I never understood. Until today. I took the box to the kitchen table, where the morning light shone mercilessly. I took out a brand new notebook, a pen, and a calculator. Arthur would never understand this action. He would call it pettiness, holding grudges. But to me, this wasn't hatred. This was an audit. An audit of the 5 years of my life that had been eroded, undervalued, and exploited. I would no longer let emotions cloud the truth. From now on, I would speak in numbers, the only language that never lies. "All right, Eleanor," I whispered to myself, my voice echoing in the silent room. "Let's see how much your investment has lost." I opened the first page of the notebook and wrote the title in capital letters, neat and clear, Financial Indictment. The first item, I wrote, Direct Financial Costs. I began flipping through the old expense books. Memories returned along with the numbers. Every week, when grocery shopping for my own family, I automatically bought extra food for my mother-in-law's household. It was an unspoken rule. Bernice never asked, but if I didn't do it, she would sigh and say things like, "Oh, I've been so weak lately, even going to the market makes me tired. I guess I'll just have instant noodles tonight." And I, the devoted daughter-in-law, never let her eat instant noodles. I remembered buying the freshest salmon fillets because she liked them, while my husband and I only ate tilapia. I bought expensive short ribs to stew for her, while my son ate fried eggs. $50 a week, I muttered, punching numbers into the calculator. Doesn't sound like much, does it? But multiply that by 52 weeks in a year. Then multiply by the last 3 years. The number appeared on the screen. $5,460. I carefully wrote it down. More than $5,000 worth of groceries, exchanged for insults. "Eleanor, next time remember to add a little more salt," she would say, lips pursed. "Sophia's cooking is much more flavorful." Second item, opportunity costs. This part was harder to calculate, but more painful. I pulled out old emails. 2 years ago, a startup reached out, wanting me to design their entire brand identity. It was a big project, a chance for me to prove myself. I had been excited. But then Bernice's voice kept ringing in my head. You think you can do that? Who would hire you to design these silly things? Be like Sophia, a director managing hundreds of people. That's what a career looks like. Those words eroded my confidence. I looked at my sketches and saw only inadequacy. I replied to their email, saying I wasn't capable enough to take the project. A few months later, I saw the company's brand identity everywhere. It had won a prestigious design award. The designer had been paid at least $2,000. I took a deep breath. Can you confirm the value of the brand identity contract for Technova about 2 years ago? I asked into the phone, pretending to talk to a partner. Yes, that's right, about 2,000. Thank you. I hung up and, with trembling hands, wrote down $2,000. $2,000 for a dream that had been killed. Section 3, Health Expenses. This was my most secret expense. I pulled out an envelope hidden at the bottom of the box. Inside were bills from a psychological clinic in the neighboring town. I had gone there once a month for the past year, paying in cash so Arthur would never know. I had lied, saying I was meeting friends. Hello, I remember saying to the therapist during the first session. I think I'm really incompetent and useless. She helped me a lot, helped me realize that I was being emotionally abused. But each therapy session was $100. 12 sessions were $1,200. I also found the medication bills. The strongest painkillers for migraines caused by stress, the headaches that always appeared after each conversation with my mother-in-law. Another about $200. I wrote down, $1,400. $1,400 to try to patch up a soul that was tearing apart. I added up all the numbers. $5,460 plus $2,000 plus $1,400 equals $8,860. $8,860. The cold number sat there on the page. But I knew my indictment was not yet complete. I drew a bold line under the total. And then, I added one last item, an item that no number could measure. The invisible cost. I looked down at the back of my right hand. The huge raised scar was still there, a permanent reminder. I remembered what Mrs. Bernice said that day, tears streaming. I owe you a life, Eleanor. A life. She had priced it with humiliation, with betrayal, with the venomous words spoken behind my back by her diamond daughter-in-law. She had assumed my kindness was free, that my sacrifices had no value. I put the pen down beside the words invisible cost and wrote 2 more words. A huge burn scar on the right hand. Priceless. I closed the notebook. The final number was not $8,860. The final number was $8,860 and a permanent raised scar. It was no longer a series of vague misfortunes. It was evidence, tangible, irrefutable. This notebook was not for me to sit and lament my fate. It was not the diary of a victim. No, it was an indictment. It was my first weapon in this war. And I knew exactly how I would use it. The notebook lay on the kitchen table, heavy like a sentence. But this time, the defendant was not me. After completing the indictment with those cold numbers, a strange calm settled over me. I was no longer a passive victim drifting in the storm. I was the architect of the counterattack. I had my first weapon. Now, I needed an ally. I picked up my phone, my finger sliding through the contacts. I stopped at Arthur's name. For a moment, old habits returned. I wanted to call him, to show him the notebook, to force him to be angry, to force him to defend me. But then I pulled my hand back. How many times had I done that already? I had given him my bleeding heart, and he only gave me empty bandages. Don't take it to heart, dear. Try for me. No. This time would be different. I would not place the burden of rescuing me on his shoulders again. I would give him a choice, but only after I had cleared the path myself. I scrolled further and stopped at my cousin Emma's name. She was the one who gave me the final piece, painful but necessary. She didn't just hear the venomous words, she chose to speak the truth, knowing it would hurt me. That wasn't the act of a bystander. That was the act of an ally. I pressed call. Hello, Eleanor. Emma's voice was still worried from the previous call. Yes, it's me, I said, my voice no longer trembling. It was steady and determined. Thank you for telling me the truth. I'm sorry, I didn't want to. No, I cut her off. You don't need to apologize. You helped me. And now, I need you to help me with one more thing. A very big thing. There was a silence on the other end. I'll do anything I can, tell me. I'm about to have a big battle here, I said, the word battle slipping out naturally. There will be a day. I don't know exactly when, but soon, everything will collapse. On that day, could I send little Leo to stay with you for a day? I don't want him to witness anything. Of course, Eleanor, she answered immediately, without hesitation. Send him anytime, for as long as you need. You know I've always loved him. Thank you. And one more thing, I took a deep breath. I need you to testify. About what you heard Sophia say. Are you willing? This time, the silence lasted longer. I knew I was asking for something not easy. Testifying against my husband's family meant she would be putting herself in an uncomfortable position. I will, she finally said, her voice full of determination. What they did to you and your parents was wrong. I can't stand still and do nothing. Tears welled in my eyes, but these were not tears of weakness. These were tears of gratitude. Thank you, Emma. You don't know what this means to me. Listen, Eleanor, she continued, her voice turning more serious. I want you to know that if things become the worst, if you decide you can't endure anymore, then move in with me. There's always a room in my house for you and your son. Don't be afraid. You're not alone. That offer of salvation. It was like a lifeline thrown to someone floundering in the ocean. It wasn't just a promise of a place to stay. It was an escape route. It was a safety net. For the past 5 years, I had always felt like I was walking on a tightrope, beneath me an endless abyss. Just one wrong step, one wrong word, and I would fall. But now, Emma had stretched a safety net under me. I could fall. And I would not die. I hung up, a powerful feeling surged through me like never before. I was no longer alone. I had evidence, and I had an ally. The fear had vanished, replaced by a plan forming in my mind, clear, sharp, and cold. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not confront pointlessly. People like Mrs. Bernice and Sophia, they liked to see my suffering, my anger. It confirmed their power. No. I would not give them that satisfaction. I would direct this final act myself. And I would use the very weapon they had used against me, submission. I had played the role of the obedient daughter-in-law, the patient wife, for 5 years. I had memorized this role. Now, I would turn it into my ultimate weapon. I would turn submission into a trap. I sat down with my notebook once more. But this time, I wasn't calculating the past. I was planning the future. I listed my steps, carefully like a general mapping out a battlefield. Step 1, wait for the opportunity. They will give it to me themselves. Arrogance always comes with carelessness. Step 2, when the opportunity comes, accept it obediently. No resistance. No suspicion. Step 3, record everything. Evidence, evidence, and more evidence. Step 4, set up the final stage. Step 5, give Arthur the choice, but a choice between truth and lies, not between wife and mother. I named my plan, writing it at the top of the page in a flowery, mocking script, the party of those who love flashiness. I looked out the window, toward Bernice's watchtower. She was still watching, I knew that. But she was no longer looking at a prisoner. She was looking at a strategist quietly digging a tunnel right beneath her feet, and she would never know it, not until the ground under her collapsed. I didn't have to wait long. Just as I predicted, the arrogance of the victor always comes with carelessness. Only 5 days after the disastrous Christmas party, the golden opportunity presented itself to me, wrapped neatly inside a phone call from Bernice. This time, her voice wasn't just sweet, it sparkled with pride and a kind of unhidden gloating. "Eleanor, are you there?" she exclaimed, her voice ringing like church bells on a holiday. "I have wonderful news. Our Sophia, the diamond of the family, she just got a big promotion. She's now the vice president. Can you believe it? At her age. I've never been prouder." I stayed silent, listening, my heart beating in an oddly calm rhythm. I could picture her sitting in her favorite armchair, her face glowing with the victory of her side. "Yes, congratulations to her," I replied, my voice even, without a trace of emotion. "That's all? Just congratulations?" She giggled, a sound that made my skin crawl. "We have to celebrate. I want to host a grand party this Saturday evening. I've already invited all the important people. And you, Eleanor is the one who always cooks for me. I want you to prepare a really lavish feast. You cook the best in the family, don't you?" She paused, waiting for resistance, a sigh, or at least a moment of hesitation. That was part of her game. She wanted to see my reluctance, so she could then force me, reinforcing her power once again. But I would not give her that satisfaction. "What dishes would you like me to make, Mom?" I asked, my voice still calm. The short silence on the other end showed she was a bit surprised by how quickly I complied. She cleared her throat, quickly regaining her commanding tone. "I want beef Wellington, it looks fancy. And also garlic butter grilled lobster, Sophia loves that. Then salad, pumpkin soup, and make that multi-layer chocolate cake you usually make. Remember, it has to be lavish, so everyone sees how blessed our family is." "How many people?" "Only about 30. Make sure there's enough. When you're done, bring everything over to my house. Everyone will celebrate over here." There it was. The final order. A demand for me to pour all my strength, time, and skill into cooking a luxury banquet, not to honor the family, but to honor the very person who mocked me daily. The one who helped my mother-in-law trample my dignity. This wasn't a request. This was the peak of humiliation. Any other woman in my position would scream, refuse, throw the phone against the wall. But I didn't. "Yes, Mom," I answered, a single word spoken with a terrifying stillness. "I'll prepare it." I could hear her satisfied sigh through the phone. "Good girl, my daughter-in-law. I know you're best at cooking and cleaning." She hung up. I placed the phone on the table. In my mind, her words were no longer an order. They were destiny's invitation. The enemy didn't just walk into my trap, they had built the perfect trap themselves and rolled out a red carpet for me to step in and set it. My preparation for war began immediately. The first thing I did was call my cousin Emma. "Sis, it's me. This Saturday. Can you pick up little Leo in the morning?" "Of course, honey. What's going on? Is the day finally here?" Her voice was filled with worry. "Yes," I replied. "It's here. Do you need me to come help you?" "No. I have to do this myself. I just need to know Leo is safe." "Thank you." After securing the rear, I began preparing for the battle. I sat down and wrote a list of the ingredients I needed. Not ordinary ingredients. I chose the most expensive ones. Wagyu beef for the Wellington. Large Alaska lobsters. Black truffles. Imported Parmesan from Italy. Pure Belgian chocolate. I didn't go shopping myself. I called a premium delivery service in the city. "Hello," I said into the phone, my voice clear and professional. "I'd like to place a large order for Saturday morning. Please write this down for me. I read each item precisely. And please, when you deliver, I need an itemized invoice, clearly printed with the store name and price of each item. This is very important. The person on the line seemed slightly surprised at my thoroughness, but he still agreed. Yes, ma'am. We will provide a full invoice. 1. Done. Ammunition purchased. Next, I cleaned my workspace. I carefully backed up all my design projects onto an external hard drive. I organized my personal documents and placed them into a separate folder. I acted methodically, like someone preparing for a long journey with no return date. That night, when Arthur came home, he found me looking through a cookbook. "What are you looking at?" he asked curiously. "You seem strangely calm." "I'm planning the menu for Sophia's promotion party this Saturday," I replied, not lifting my head. Arthur froze. "What? Mom is making you cook again? That's unbelievable. Let me call her." "No need," I said, looking up at him for the first time. My eyes no longer held pleading or sadness. They were still, like a lake without ripples. "It's fine. I'll do it. This will be the last time." The phrase "the last time" seemed to carry unusual weight. Arthur looked at me, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. He sensed something had changed, but he couldn't name it. He simply thought I had finally learned to accept. He had no idea that I was not accepting, I was preparing to destroy. My kitchen, the place that had witnessed countless silent tears and sweat, where I had created countless meals only to receive disdain, was about to become something else. It was no longer a kitchen. It was about to become my war room. And the upcoming party would not be a celebration. It would be an execution. Saturday morning, the house was drowned in an eerie silence. Arthur had taken Leo to Emma's early. He returned, looking at me with guilt in his eyes. "I'm really sorry, Eleanor," he said, standing awkwardly at the kitchen door. "I shouldn't let you do this alone." "It's okay," I replied, tying on my familiar apron, my armor for the past 5 years. "Go to work. I can handle it. How about I stay home and help you?" "No," I said firmly. "This is my task. And I want to complete it myself." He looked at me for a long moment, his eyes full of confusion, then reluctantly left. The front door closed, and I was alone in my war room. Right at that moment, the doorbell rang. The delivery man had arrived. 2 large boxes filled with the most expensive ingredients were placed neatly on the kitchen floor. I checked the invoice. Everything was there, the total amount nearly $500, clear and sharp. I carefully placed the invoice into a zip bag. And then, I began my work. But today, I was not a housewife. I was a forensic artist, and this kitchen was a crime scene. Every action of mine was calculated and recorded with a cold precision. I placed my phone on a small tripod in the corner of the kitchen, adjusting the angle so it could capture the entire space. I was not recording video. I only needed photos. The first photo, a full shot of the clean, tidy kitchen before the battle began. The second photo, 2 boxes of expensive ingredients lying in the middle of the floor, next to the nearly $500 bill. Then, I began the cooking process. But my mind was not focused on the flavor of the food. It was focused on collecting evidence. When I kneaded the dough for the beef Wellington, I didn't just feel the elasticity of the dough. I took a close-up picture of my hands, my fingers covered in flour, and standing out on my right arm and the back of my right hand had to be that huge raised scar. Under that photo, I knew I would write. The hands that were once burned to save a life, now kneading dough for the party of someone who likes flashiness, likes high status, likes strong finances. When I prepped the Alaska lobster, I photographed the price tag still stuck on its shell. I photographed the messy pile of lobster shells after removing the meat. Every step was recorded. The pot of pumpkin soup boiling furiously. The golden beef Wellington tray fresh out of the oven. The batch of chocolate cake being frosted. The kitchen gradually became messy, a real battlefield with pots and bowls piling up. I photographed that too. A wide shot of the chaos. A tangible piece of evidence of my effort. In the middle of that, my phone rang. It was Mrs. Bernice. "Hello, Eleanor?" Her voice was impatient. "How far have you gotten? Everything okay?" A thought flashed through my mind. I glanced at the call recording button on the screen. My finger trembled slightly, then firmly pressed it. "Yes, everything is still fine, Mother," I answered, trying to sound tired. "Good. Make sure it's delicious, okay? My guests are all gourmets. Don't make me lose face." "Yes, I know, Mother. But there are so many dishes, it's a bit tiring for me to do it alone." "What's so tiring about it?" she snapped. "That's your duty. Sophia has to take care of much bigger things. You're just at home cooking a few dishes and you're already complaining. Enough, get back to work. Don't call me to whine anymore. You must be at my house at 7 tonight." She hung up. I looked at the screen. "Call has been recorded." Perfect. I saved the recording file with a simple name. Order. Then I opened a new photo album on my phone. I didn't name it Party or Cooking. I gave it a more formal name, one an investigator would use: Project Sophia's Promotion Party. I began uploading all my evidence into it. Dozens of photos capturing every step, every detail. The scan of the nearly $500 bill. And finally, the recorded phone call. The entire case file fit neatly into one phone. Exactly at 7 in the evening, I finished everything. 10 lavish dishes, beautifully arranged on the largest plates I had. The kitchen looked like it had gone through a hurricane. And I looked even worse. Hair disheveled, face smudged, apron covered with grease and flour. I took one last selfie. A mugshot of a prisoner before escape. I began the process of transferring the offering. I had to go back and forth 5 trips to carry all the food to my mother-in-law's house. Her house was lit brightly, full of laughter and chatter. When I stepped in, all eyes turned toward me and the dishes in my hands. "Ah, Eleanor is here," Mrs. Bernice exclaimed, stepping forward with a visibly satisfied expression. "Oh wow, looks delicious. If my daughter-in-law chose to be a chef, she would have made money already." She spoke to the guests as a familiar way of insulting me. I quietly placed the dishes on the already set party table. Sophia brushed past me, holding a champagne glass, wearing a designer dress. "Thank you, Eleanor," she said, smiling contentedly. "They look really nice. You really only suit kitchen work." I didn't answer. I just looked at her. My gaze was so calm that she had to look away. After finishing the setup, I turned to leave. Mrs. Bernice blocked me at the door. "Where are you going?" "I'm going home," I replied. "Good," she nodded, as if giving orders to a maid. "Go clean your kitchen. It must look horrible. After you finish cleaning, just rest, no need to come here for the party. It's all business talk, you wouldn't understand anything." She finished, gently pushed me outside, and slammed the door shut. The laughter, the clinking glasses still echoed from inside. I stood before that slammed door for a long moment. I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel angry. I only felt a sense of completion. The stage had been perfectly set. All the actors were in their correct positions. I turned and walked toward my house. Tonight, there would be no party there. Tonight, there would be a tsunami. Haha. I returned to my kitchen, my battlefield. The door closed behind me, separating me from the fake laughter and the sounds of those joyfully enjoying the fruits of my labor. Here, there was only silence. A heavy, thick silence, broken only by the humming of the refrigerator. The kitchen was so messy it was unbelievable. Pots piled in the sink, countertops covered with flour and sauce stains, the floor streaked with oil. The smell of food, the smell of fried garlic, melting butter, and bitter chocolate still lingered in the air, but now they were no longer appetizing. They carried the smell of labor. I didn't rush to clean. Instead, I pulled out a chair, sat down in the middle of the kitchen, facing myself in the blurry glass of the oven. And then, my eyes stopped at what was wrapped around me, the apron. The rough gray-blue apron, now stained, covered with the marks of a day of battle. It had been with me for 5 years. It was the first thing I put on every morning and the last thing I took off every night. It wasn't just a piece of cloth. It was my uniform. It was my armor. It was the symbol of the role I had blindly played for too long. I looked at it, and for the first time, I truly saw it. I whispered, a conversation only it and I could hear. "We've been quite the duo, haven't we?" My voice was hoarse, echoing in the quiet space. "You and me. Every morning I put you on, I wasn't Eleanor anymore. I became daughter-in-law Eleanor. I became Arthur's wife. I was the one who cooked, the one who cleaned, the one who cared. I was every role except one, myself." I lifted my hand, my fingers tracing a dark grease stain near the apron's pocket. The memory came back, vivid and sharp. "Do you remember this one?" I asked it. "This is from Tuesday night, when I had to fry those crispy salmon fillets that Sophia likes. That girl didn't even bother coming home to eat, but my mother-in-law said, just make it anyway, in case Sophia comes home and wants something." I stood here for an hour, breathing in the greasy smell, only to end up throwing the whole plate away. "You took all the splattered oil from that night." My fingers moved to a yellowish stain near the bottom edge. "And this one?" I gave a dry laugh. "Do you know where this came from?" "I'm not even sure myself. Maybe from that chicken curry I had to cook in a rush because my mother-in-law said she was craving Indian food. Or maybe it's from my tears the night my parents were humiliated. I stood here in the kitchen, crying in silence, and maybe I subconsciously used you to catch my tears. You must have been so tired, huh?" I looked down at the raised scar on my arm, then back at the apron I had worn all these years. "You witnessed everything," I continued, my voice no longer a whisper but filled with bitter realization. "You were there when I turned down a big design project just because my mother-in-law said I was incompetent and shouldn't take it or I'd ruin the job. You were there when I had to lie to Arthur so I could go see a therapist. You absorbed every stain, every drop of sweat, every tear, just to keep my performance as the perfect daughter-in-law spotless." 8 hums. I paused and took a deep breath. The air in the kitchen felt easier to breathe. "But you know what?" I said, looking straight at it as if it were a living thing. "I was wrong. You weren't armor. You were the cage. You were the chain that tied me to this kitchen. To this role. You were the symbol of my voluntary servitude." I stood up slowly, each movement deliberate and solemn. I carefully loosened the knot behind my back, the frayed fabric sliding across my fingers. I gently pulled it over my head. For the first time in hours, I felt cool air touch the clothing underneath. A strange lightness washed over me, as if I had lifted a weight that had sat on my shoulders for 5 years. I held the apron in my hands. It was limp, heavy with grease and sweat. I looked at it one last time. I no longer felt hatred. I felt pity. Pity for it, and pity for the woman who had worn it. I stepped toward the trash bin and opened the lid. With no hesitation, no regret, I dropped it in. It hit the bottom with a faint thud, but in my ears, the sound echoed like a gunshot ending a life. "It's time for you to rest," I said to it. "And for me too." That act was a ritual. A clean break. The woman who wore that apron had died. She died in this kitchen, in the mess she used to clean for others. And from her ashes, someone else was being reborn. After that, I turned around and looked at the battlefield. But now, I no longer saw chaos. I saw a task that needed to be done. One final task. I began to clean. I turned on the hot water and poured soap into the sink. I dipped my hands into the warm water and began scrubbing each plate, each pot. The clinking sounds of dishes hitting each other were no longer sounds of exhaustion. They were sounds of purification. I wasn't just cleaning a kitchen. I was cleaning my life. I scrubbed away the stains of endurance. I rinsed off the remnants of meaningless sacrifice. I wiped dry the memories of humiliation. Bit by bit, the kitchen returned to its original form. Clean. Shiny. Orderly. When the last plate was placed on the rack, I looked around. This space was no longer my prison. It was mine, completely mine. I made myself a cup of tea and sat down on the same chair as before. But this time, I wasn't facing a symbol of servitude. I was facing a new beginning. And I sat there calmly, waiting for Arthur to come home. I sat there, in the silence of the kingdom I had just liberated, sipping my hot tea. I didn't know how long I sat. Time seemed to have stopped. No restlessness, no anxiety, only a serene anticipation. Then, I heard the familiar sounds. Arthur's car pulling into the garage. Keys rattling in the lock. The door opening. He walked in, exhausted after a long day at work. He loosened his tie and placed his briefcase on the chair. "Eleanor, I'm home," he called, his voice weary. "Wow, what's that smell? Something smells amazing." He stepped into the kitchen, and then he froze. He looked at me, sitting calmly at the table, then looked around at the spotless kitchen. Confusion spread across his face. "Eleanor? What's going on?" he asked. "Why? Why is the kitchen so clean? How did the party go? Did everyone finish eating already?" I set my teacup down and looked straight into his eyes. The eyes I once looked into for protection, I was now looking into them searching for a partner. "The dinner is over at your mother's house," I said, my voice steady. "But I cooked the last dinner for them." Arthur blinked, trying to process my words. "Last? What do you mean, Eleanor? What do you mean by last?" He stepped closer, concern now clear on his face. "Did you argue with Mom again? Did she say something that upset you?" That was always his default reaction. Always assuming I was the difficult one, the one overreacting. My past tears had only reinforced that assumption. But tonight, there would be no tears. I didn't answer his question. I didn't complain. I didn't rant. I simply picked up my phone and unlocked the screen. "I don't want to explain anymore, Arthur," I said calmly. "I want you to see for yourself. I cooked the last dinner for them, and this was my afternoon." I handed him my phone, the screen already open to the photo album I had titled Project, Sophia's Promotion Party. He took the phone, still looking doubtful. "What's this album?" "Just look," I said. "And when you're done with the photos, listen to the recording at the end. Please look at all of it." He hesitated, then started scrolling. I watched him closely, watched every small expression pass across his face. The first photo, the clean kitchen. He scrolled. The second photo, 2 boxes of luxury ingredients and the nearly $500 invoice. His eyebrows pinched slightly. $500? What did you buy? "Just keep going," I said gently. He scrolled. A close-up of my hands kneading dough, the burn scar stark and visible. I saw his jaw tighten. He scrolled again. The Alaska lobsters, the Wagyu beef, the ingredients he knew very well we would never buy for our own meals. He scrolled faster now. Photos of the kitchen in disarray, like a battlefield, stacks of pots and pans. And then he stopped at the selfie of me. The one I took before bringing the food over. My face unsmiling, dark circles under my eyes, the apron covered in stains. It wasn't the wife he saw every day. It was a soldier exhausted after a battle. "God, Eleanor," he whispered, his voice breaking. It's not over yet, I said. Listen to the recording. His fingers trembled as he tapped the audio file named Order. Our kitchen, which was supposed to be a peaceful home, now echoed with the shrill, commanding voice of his mother. What's so tiring about it? That's your duty. Sophia has to deal with much bigger things. You're just at home cooking a few dishes and you're already complaining. The food must be at my house by 7 tonight. The recording ended, returning silence to the room. But this silence was heavy and suffocating. Arthur stood still, the phone in his hand feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. His face went pale, shifting from confusion to shock, and from shock to a rage I had never seen in him. His eyes were no longer tired, they burned like two coals. These cold, undeniable pieces of evidence had done what my tears and my pleas during the past 5 years could not do. They had ripped apart the veil covering his eyes. He lifted his head to look at me, and his eyes were full of deep regret. Eleanor. I didn't know. I stood up, walked closer to him. I didn't touch him. I only stood there, giving him the space to make his own decision. The party is still over at Mother's, I said, my voice clear and firm. Her guests, the dishes I cooked, everything is still there. You can go and attend it. To congratulate Sophia. To fulfill the role of a dutiful son, a good brother. I won't stop you. I paused for a moment to let my words sink in. Or, I continued, you can stay here. Eat the simple dinner I prepared just for us. And tomorrow morning, we will leave. I already called Emma. She's waiting for us. I'm not putting the burden of saving me on your shoulders, Arthur. I'm not making you choose between your wife and your mother. I looked straight into his eyes, my gaze filled with determination. I'm giving you a choice. Between that world and a new world of ours. He stared at me, then looked toward the window, toward the lights and laughter coming from his mother's house. The world he was familiar with. The world of obligations, roles, and fake peace. Then he looked back at me. At the woman who had endured everything in silence, who had turned her pain into evidence, and was now giving him the final decision. Now, he didn't need to be angry to protect me. He didn't need to fight his mother. He only needed to choose. Choose to stand on the side of the truth. He stepped forward, set the phone on the table. He didn't say anything, just reached out and pulled me into a tight hug. A hug completely different from all the others. It wasn't comfort, it was solidarity. He released me, his hands still gripping my shoulders. He looked at me, and for the first time in a very long time, I saw the man I had fallen in love with. A strong, decisive man. Pack up, Eleanor, he said, his voice low and firm. We're leaving right now. Arthur's decision was not an empty promise. It was an action order. In the next 20 minutes, our house turned into an emergency evacuation center. There was no hesitation. No regret. Only quick, decisive actions. Arthur carried 2 large suitcases down from the attic. I gathered the most important personal items, documents, my computer, the hard drive containing my projects, and of course, the notebook I had titled Financial Indictment. When we were about to bring the suitcases to the car, Arthur stopped at the door. He turned to look at me, his eyes containing a determination I had never seen. Wait, Eleanor, he said, his voice dropping. We can't just leave like this. We're not cowards running away. We will leave, but with our heads held high. There are a few things that need to be made clear. I understood him. This was not a midnight escape. This was a declaration of independence. I nodded, gripping the notebook tightly. This time, when we walked to his mother's house, the roles were completely reversed. He was no longer the son trying to smooth things over. I was no longer the silent daughter-in-law. We were a united front. We were partners. Arthur flung the door open without knocking. The laughter in the living room suddenly died. 30 pairs of eyes turned to us. Mrs. Bernice, standing in the center of the room with a wine glass, her face glowing moments earlier, suddenly darkened when she saw us. "Arthur? Eleanor?" she said, her voice irritated. "What are you two doing here? I told Eleanor to go home and rest, didn't I?" "We didn't come to attend the party, Mother," Arthur said, his voice cold and loud, overpowering the soft background music. He stepped into the room, and I followed close behind him. "We came to say goodbye." A suffocating silence filled the room. The guests looked at one another, not understanding what was happening. Sophia, sitting on the sofa like a queen, frowned. "Goodbye," Bernice repeated, her voice rising in a shrill tone. "What are you talking about, Arthur? Don't make a fool of yourself in front of my guests." "I'm not making a fool of myself," Arthur shot back, his gaze unwavering. "I'm telling the truth. Eleanor and I are leaving. Right now." "What?" This time it was Julian, his brother. "Have you gone crazy, Arthur? What the hell are you talking about?" "I've never been more clear," Arthur said, his eyes scanning each person in his family. "For the past 5 years, I've been blind. I let my wife endure humiliation, contempt, just because I was too weak to stand up to Mother." "Arthur!" Bernice screamed, her face flushing in anger and embarrassment. "What nonsense are you saying? That girl must have done something to manipulate you, hasn't she?" The argument began to escalate. Accusations, excuses, shouting. I just stood there, silently observing. I had seen this scene too many times, but this time there was a difference. I was no longer the target of the attack. I was the catalyst for an uprising. When the chaos reached its peak, I calmly stepped forward. "Sorry to interrupt," I said, my voice not loud, but containing a weight that forced everyone into silence. "Before we leave, I just want to clarify a few things about the financial aspect, so that everyone here, especially the investors, can better understand the situation." To unstarred. The room went still. The phrases "financial aspect" and "investors" were completely out of place in a family argument, and their oddness captured everyone's full attention. I looked straight at Sophia. Her eyes widened, her smug smile disappearing, replaced by caution. I looked at Bernice, who was staring at me as if I were some strange creature. "This family," I began, my voice as clear as a CEO presenting to a board of directors, "has operated like a company for the past 5 years. A family company with a very clear investment structure." I opened my notebook. "Here, we have Sophia. She is the blue chip stock of the company," I said, a faint mocking smile appearing on my lips. "A safe investment that brings high returns in terms of reputation, in terms of social standing. Every achievement of hers increases the brand value of Bernice Family Corporation." Sophia froze, her face draining of color. And then, I turned to another page. "We have me, Eleanor. I am not a stock. I am another type of asset. I am cheap labor. I am the one providing unpaid services, from cooking, cleaning, to health care. A resource exploited to the extreme to maintain the company's daily operations without costing a single dollar." I looked up, staring straight into Bernice's eyes. "But there is a basic rule in business that any investor knows. That is, any asset whether human or mechanical has an exploitation limit. If you overuse it without maintenance, without reinvestment, sooner or later it will run dry and collapse." I closed the notebook with a sharp thud. Tonight, the asset called Eleanor has officially run dry. It no longer has the ability to regenerate. It only brings losses in terms of mental value. And when an investment becomes chronically unprofitable, what does a wise investor do, Madam Vice President? I asked, directing the question straight at Sophia. She didn't answer. She just sat there, stunned. "They liquidate," I answered myself. "They cut the losses to preserve what remains. So tonight, I am officially liquidating my investment in this family." I smiled, a cold smile with no warmth. "Congratulations, Sophia. From today on, you are the sole asset of this company. But that also means you will be the only one responsible for all maintenance, care, and meeting every demand of the CEO. Good luck with your new investment." Every word I spoke was like a surgical blade, severing the last remaining ties. No emotion. Only the ruthless logic of business. I had turned my personal tragedy into an economic lesson, and that made it impossible for them to argue back. Finally, I turned to Arthur, who was standing beside me, his eyes filled with shock and pride. "Arthur," I said, my voice softening. "You've heard the analysis. Now it's time for you to decide. Do you want to invest your entire life in a family company that is emotionally bankrupt? Or do you want to step out there with me, and we'll build a new startup together, a company of our own, starting from scratch?" That question, my final proposal, ended everything. It was no longer a battle between wife and mother. It was a choice between a toxic past and a hopeful future. Arthur didn't need to say a single word. He simply reached out, took my hand tightly, and turned to look at his mother and brother one last time. His eyes no longer held anger, only regret, and a final severance. "Enjoy your dinner," he said. And then, we turned and walked out of that door together, leaving behind the lavish party, the stunned faces, and the ashes of a mother who had burned herself down. Arthur's hand in mine was a vow. The moment we stepped across that threshold, leaving behind the stage of pretense, the cold night air rushed into my chest like an antidote. This was not an escape. It was a procession of two soldiers who had just reclaimed their freedom. We didn't speak until we were both seated in the car, the engine running, and the lights of the triangular prison fading and then disappearing in the rear-view mirror. Arthur drove in silence for a few minutes, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Then he spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. "I'm sorry, Eleanor." "For what?" I asked gently. "For everything," he replied, his voice breaking. "For not seeing. For not listening. For letting you fight alone for so long. I thought I was trying to keep peace, but really I was just maintaining a ceasefire where you were the only one getting shot. I was such a coward." I reached out and placed my hand over his on the wheel. "No, Arthur. You're not a coward. You were just a son who was trapped. But tonight, you chose. You chose us. And to me, that is everything." "But I let things go too far," he said, anguished. "The way you had to turn yourself into an accountant just to prove your pain. You should never have had to do that. You should never have had to do that." "Yes, I did," I said, and he turned to look at me, surprised. I needed to do it for myself. To stop treating my pain as some vague emotion and start seeing it as an undeniable truth. "And you? You believed the truth when you saw it. Not everyone can do that." We drove in silence for a little longer, but this silence was different. It wasn't distance. It was understanding. "So, what's the plan for our startup, Madam Director?" he asked, a tired but sincere smile appearing on his face for the first time. I smiled back. "Step 1, survive tonight. Step 2, build a truly happy life." 2 years later, I was sitting in my design studio, really just a small sunlit room at the back of our new house. My eyes were no longer glued to numbers in a notebook, but to vibrant colors on my computer screen. My online design shop, the Phoenix Studio, had become far more successful than I ever imagined. I worked with clients who appreciated my talent, people who paid for my creativity, not my obedience. Our house was small, but full of joy and respect. It wasn't squeezed between anyone. Its windows were meant for catching the morning sun, not for watching and judging. Every evening, Arthur came home with a smile that no longer held exhaustion or guilt. He had found a new job at another company, a less stressful environment. He said that for the first time in his life, he felt like he was breathing with his own lungs. Our kingdom wasn't built on money or reputation. It was built on respect, peace, and dinners we cooked together, without a single command from anyone. I never heard from them directly again. I had blocked all their numbers. But sometimes, the echoes from the ashes still reached me, through Emma during our weekend coffees. "You won't believe this, Eleanor," she said one Saturday afternoon, stirring her latte. "That family company of yours truly fell apart." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I wasn't the least bit surprised. "When they no longer had a common victim to bully," she explained, "Bernice started turning her control toward the only remaining blue-chip stock. She demanded Sophia come home for dinner twice a week, take her shopping." "And what about Sophia?" Emma burst into laughter. "Sophia is not you, Eleanor. That girl is not used to enduring anything." She fought back hard. "They argue constantly now. Their yelling echoes through the whole neighborhood. The two tigers are no longer united, they're tearing each other apart. And Julian? Poor guy," she sighed. "With no more fake happy family image to cling to, and with you no longer there to absorb everything, he started seeing his wife's true nature and the suffocation from his mother. He realized his wife only cared about money and status, scorned both him and his mother openly, and his mother wanted everything in the world. I heard they're separated now. That family rotted from the inside faster than I expected." I sat still listening to her tell the story. I did not feel satisfied. I did not feel delighted. I only felt a deep peace. It was the inevitable ending of a system built on toxicity. On a sunny weekend afternoon, our car rolled along a dusty gravel road I knew well. The scent of damp soil after the rain, the faint smell of orange blossom drifting in the wind. It was the smell of peace, the smell of the place where I was born. Arthur, Leo, and I stepped out of the car, and the memory of my father's old pickup truck and the basket of orchard apples from years ago rushed back, but this time, it no longer carried the bitterness of humiliation, but the sweetness of gratitude. My mother had been standing on the porch for who knows how long, her gentle smile wiping away every exhaustion in the world. She didn't say much, just hugged me tightly, warmly, with the scent of home. My father, his hair now having more white strands, came out and patted little Leo's head as he chirped beside him. His eyes looking at me no longer held the helpless sorrow of that Christmas party night. They sparkled with pride, a quiet pride as steady as the mountain behind the house. That dinner had no beef Wellington or Alaska lobster. Only a pot of chicken noodle soup my mother cooked, a plate of small fish, and a plate of steamed broccoli picked from the garden. Arthur, no longer awkward, naturally picked a piece of fish for my father, and Leo was being passed back and forth by his grandparents. We sat together around the simple meal, under the warm yellow light, and I realized this was the real feast. After dinner, when Leo had fallen asleep, "Dad, Mom," I spoke softly. "I'm sorry." My father turned to me. "What are you sorry for?" "For letting you have to witness that scene that day," my voice choked. "For my silence hurting you both." My father said nothing, just reached out his rough, calloused hand shaped by years of labor, and placed it on mine. "Daughter," he said, his voice warm and low. My eyes that day, they were not helpless, child. They were the eyes of a father realizing his daughter had reached the moment she had to fight for herself, and I was only heartbroken that I couldn't fight in your place. But you did it. You won your own battle. We have never been more proud of you. Tears rolled down my cheeks, but these were tears of release. I squeezed my father's hand, looking straight into his and my mother's eyes. "I promise you," I said, my voice steady again, carrying the weight of a vow. "From now on, no one, no words will be able to trample on me, or hurt you again. I will live a truly happy life, so you can be at peace." My mother smiled, a bright, radiant smile. She stepped forward and wrapped both my father and me in her arms. The peaceful picture I had always longed for, it wasn't brilliant or flashy, hung on a wall for people to admire. It was right here. It was simple and warm. Now then, if you like this story, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me which part surprised you the most, okay? Every subscription and comment from you is a huge motivation for us to continue sharing more meaningful things in life. Thank you so much.